This is a coral reef.
You see pillar corals up over here, you see boulder corals over here, you see sea fans flapping in the breeze, and you see the reef slope of just all of these different shapes and forms.
But this is also a coral reef.
Sort of a sinking feeling of where is everything? Where did it all go? What's under here? What was here before?
In too many places, this is now the norm. Coral reefs around the world have been badly damaged in recent decades by overfishing, disease, invasive species, and pollution from fast-paced coastal development. But a comprehensive international report released last year, focused on the Caribbean, offers a guardedly optimistic path to recovery. Marine conservation groups are working with citizens and politicians on the ground and in the blue waters around the Caribbean to see that this roadmap becomes a reality. One potential bright spot is Curaçao, an island with a long history mixing industrial development, tourism, and fishing, but with reefs that in many spots remain remarkably healthy and full of life.
So coral reefs are incredibly important ecosystems in the ocean because they're effectively the rainforests of the sea. So while rainforests harbor extremely diverse organisms, same is true of coral reefs.
A coral is an organism that has evolved to utilize scarce resources in the marine environment. The stony corals like to live in tropical oceans where there's very little sediment and there's a lot of sunlight. And the sunlight's important because 250 million years ago plus, corals decided to have a good working relationship with plants.
And so what they're doing is actually harvesting light for photosynthesis. And when they do this and they produce sugars and other things from photosynthesis, they're releasing that energy to the coral, and the coral is essentially feeding on that. So even though it's an animal, it's kind of acting like a plant because it has these photosynthesizers inside it that's releasing all this energy to it.
I look at corals as an amazing result of evolutionary relatedness and symbiosis and getting along with each other.
And why this is so amazing is because when you look out at the ocean, out here, there's not a lot in it. It's very blue, and so there's just not a lot of stuff to eat in it. So corals have been able to manage this new way, which is it's very clear, so they use the sunlight to grow. What's really amazing about corals, though, is that they form the base of this extremely diverse ecosystem. Corals only cover, we estimate, about 0.1% of the world's oceans, but 50% of the species that live in the ocean live on a coral reef at some point in their life.
And then in terms of the health of the world's oceans, the vast majority of fish that live in the oceans, they have a larval stage that actually come into coral reefs. And the coral reef entity is a nursery. It's a breeding ground for a lot of these open water fish.
For 60 years, the Carmabi Research Station has been advancing understanding of Curaçao's reef resource.
So the way to think about coral reefs as being important, I mean, a lot of people think that they're slimy stones. And then, okay, how does it affect us? People only care if coral reefs are sort of making their lives better somehow. Well, and that's true. And then the easiest way to measure that is in terms of money. So how do corals make money for people? Well, fisheries depend on coral reefs being there. Corals build the city that fish live in. No corals, no fish, no fisheries. Tourism is another one. There's a lot of people that fly all over the world to come places like this to see coral reefs, and they spend money here, you make money again. So that's how coral reefs directly make you money?
Coral reefs create these barriers around islands. And so as we have storm surge and other things, reef flats and coral reef ecosystem, that's Mother Nature's way of dampening out major wave action and destruction to our coastal areas. So there's a major physical presence of reefs that are so important. The potential for coral reefs in terms of human medicine is remarkable, and I would categorize or organize that in kind of twofold. One of them, the ability of a coral to grow a skeleton, you might not think about it, it speaks directly to things like human kidney stones, and we're able to use the reef as a model to approach kidney stone disease. And as obesity and diabetes and other things keep increasing on a global scale, kidney stones are mounting as a real problem. Another one is what we call natural products. And natural products is going to a rainforest or a coral reef, find biochemicals that will allow us to treat and face different types of human diseases.
I think Curaçao's been really lucky so far. Curaçao is some of the healthiest reefs in the Caribbean. And that's not because of marine reserves, that's not because of strong pollution controls, it's not because coastal development hasn't happened.
The island is shaped like a plane wing. So basically what happens, like a lot of islands where stuff, pollution, sewage, chemicals go in the water, what happens is that there's wakes behind the island. So everything that goes in the water is basically washed away right away.
It's because, great currents that flush pollution out. It's because the whole North Shore hasn't been developed just because it's not the type of topography that lends itself to that. And so figuring out how to transition from luck to deliberately protecting the reefs is the transition right now.
The reason why parrotfish, or any herbivore for that matter, are so special is because of this eternal battle that takes place on coral reefs. So on one side you have the corals, on the other hand you have the algae. Algae can grow way faster. So in that sense, like corals need a little bit of help to prevent that these algae sort of overgrow them, and that's herbivores.
Parrotfish eat coral, dead coral, algae, and they poop sand. It's pretty amazing. So I think, I'm forgetting the exact figures, but parrotfish can create a ton of sand a year, a single parrotfish. And so when you see white sandy beaches, it's almost as if you should say thank you to the parrotfish, which is a little bit gross to some people.
People on Curaçao never really ate parrotfish that much. It was not on the menu as it was in many other places, so they were lucky in that sense.
I think it's amazing just to think about how big a role that they play in the ecosystem as far as keeping the reefs clean of algae and creating these sandy beaches that we can all enjoy. So making sure that we preserve, conserve, protect the key herbivores that are maintaining that balance between coral and algae is critical, and parrotfish are the #1 in that regard.
But a reef is not just coral animals and calcium rock. It's a bustling biological city where all the inhabitants depend upon each other. Fish are a critical component, but they are also a coveted resource. When they are depleted, trouble brews.
We have a lot of threats here on the island. The ocean is on a lot of threats, like ocean acidification, global warming, diseases and plagues in corals. Sea urchin die-off in the beginning of the 80s, which are an important herbivore on the coral reef. So there is a whole large list of problems.
The historic effects that people have, and like if you would make a timeline of like how did we insult the Caribbean or the reefs there at least, it started early on. I mean, there's things right now that don't even exist anymore. We had the 2 big die-offs. Like people here couldn't go in the water around 2 o'clock, because there were these big sea urchins that in the morning would sort of get together and then during the day would sort of move out and start eating all over the reef. No more. They died in the early 80s, and there went all the mowing power basically not good. It doesn't necessarily have to look nice, but you want to have these things that build reefs, recruitment, predation, herbivory, you want them there. And herbivory went out of the window there after these things died off, due to what we think is a pathogen that came through the Panama Canal. So that started it. Then what happened is that the biggest framework builders, the elkhorn coral, well, you can sort of imagine what that looks like. It was a big structure, it was the big structure builder for a lot of fish. Due to some sort of disease, white band disease, those things all died. And there went structure and there went herbivory for Caribbean reefs in the span of like 5 years. And you sort of see, yes, there are some sort of places that are lucky, but the majority of the Caribbean, they couldn't deal with it, and it basically all collapsed.
I believe that the 2 most important problems are the pollution and the overfishing. As a small island development state, we cannot stop global warming, but we can do something to deal with the pollution and to make our fishery sector more sustainable.
Like the corals, fish in the Caribbean have faced a host of threats, from heavy fishing to spreading coastal construction.
Curaçao, when I first started coming here, was thinking about new fisheries regulations. And one of the things they were considering was if there was a way to manage fish traps so that they'd be more sustainable, because fish traps, everything swims in and then everything gets caught. And it's not necessarily what fishermen are targeting. So it's not a very selective method of fishing. There's a lot of waste associated with it, a lot of bycatch. And so one of the questions was whether putting a vertical rectangular slot in the side would let the juvenile fish, the ornamental fish, escape without hurting fishermen's incomes.
My name is Ryan de Jong. We're one of the old families of the island. My family arrived in Curaçao in 1798. And I'm a very active volunteer of Carmabi Research Center, which is a marine biology institute. The biggest change for me is the Spanish water. I've seen the Spanish water completely with mangroves, the red mangrove. Nowadays it's all gone because it's all condominiums and hotels and houses. The 60% of the fish that live on the reef lay their eggs between the red mangrove. We know we need that fish to eat the algae and to maintain those corals.
You see this point over here? In the past, when I was a small boy, it was all nice elkhorn corals. Now it's all flat.
We have a lot of wastewater which is polluting our shores, and you know we depend on tourism and people don't want to swim in polluted water.
We're seeing a dumping of sewage water. So the positive thing is that Curaçao has a sewage system, but regretfully it is not working optimally because it has some issues. Mostly has to do with maintenance of the pumps.
When rainfall increases, you have the runoff, especially if there's agriculture. It brings nitrates and phosphates into the water. The algae blooms, and no matter what they do biochemically, they can't keep up with it. And indeed, the parrotfish and the sea urchins go around and graze off some of that, but they can't even get all that off either.
So that's a pretty hot issue, and I think they really have to put quick attention to that. Otherwise, the economy can get in trouble. So it's not that easy, but I think the awareness is coming.
Given that there are a number of things that we can't control in these situations, say it be pathogens coming in and causing diseases, climate change, which I would at least argue is Curaçao is not able to do all that much as a small island nation about climate change. But I think what you do is manage what you can. And so to do that, we can think about what we broadly term local impacts, right? So we think about local impacts as things like pollution runoff or sewage going off into the water or overharvesting of fish, in particular herbivores that eat algae that are competing with corals down on the reef. Time and time again, there have been studies coming out that show that if you can reduce some of these local impacts, these things like pollution or overfishing, that coral reef ecosystems are tougher when they do have to experience things like disease or elevated temperatures, or that they bounce back quicker.
In the meantime, a Sea Corps Foundation biologist is researching how to grow corals in tanks and transport them to reefs.
I have this really special one here. This is a brain coral. You see already it's starting to make the shapes of those grooves that you see that are so typical of those brain corals. And what is so special about these guys is that this is the only specimen we have in the world growing in artificial conditions, or the only one that has been grown from spawn, basically. Most of those corals are now on the reef, and they go through different experiments. We outplant them in different reef conditions, so we try to see if we can be successful at outplanting corals even in very degraded areas, or if they will do well only in specific conditions. We just try to understand them better and understand why some of them survive and others don't. What are the little challenges of everyday life of a coral?
In February, Curaçao, together with the Waite Institute, launched the Blue Halo Initiative, a marine zoning plan aimed at sustaining both the economy and coral bounty.
So the Blue Halo Initiative, very simply, is about using the ocean without using it up. That's it. It's about sustainable use. So it's not simply about conservation, setting things aside where people can't go or can't fish. It's about finding that balance that works in every place, and that'll be different from place to place. The Blue Halo Initiative started on Barbuda as a small island to do the pilot project, but really the Waite Institute, we look for places where there's strong political will. So politicians from the highest levels understand the extreme importance of managing their natural resources sustainably, but they don't have necessarily the technical capacity to do that.
The government has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Waite Institute, and they're sending all their people free of charge here to like I said, to make policy, to assist us in making policy, to assist us in making the laws, and we can always translate the laws, of course, and also in educating our population, our children, but also our fishermen on our marine ecology system, and what we should do to maintain it and to make it durable, sustainable.
So that's what the Blue Halo Initiative is, and we started in Barbuda, we expanded to Montserrat and Curaçao. We didn't want to be an organization that only worked on very small islands. We wanted to make sure that this toolkit that we've developed is something that can be used anywhere. So we didn't want to just work on small islands, and Curaçao was our big leap to see how we could help a place like this that's much more complicated but also has a lot more local capacity.
One complicating factor is the need to expand tourism.
We want tourism to have a lot of economic and social benefits, and for that we need to grow, because every other sector is either stagnant or declining. If you look at the growth that we're expecting, that we're working towards, we're looking at additional airlift out of Europe. We're expecting JetBlue to increase frequencies. 2 or 3 years down the road, we won't have enough rooms for the tourists that we're expecting to be able to attract.
Another complication is skepticism from fishermen.
Lately they want to establish no fishing zones. We don't have any problem with the no fishing zones, but according to us, there are too much no fishing zones. Over here you can really get catch of the day.
The one wants to take the fish away from the sea, and the other one wants to see more fish in the sea.
A vital question is what happens to the area known as Oostpunt?
The Oostpunt is a very important development because the owner of it owns 10% of the island, but right at the Oostpunt and up to the hills, that area should be protected. And we are trying to do everything possible that nothing will be constructed there. We have to do it in a way that you can develop it without hurting the coast. But we can talk about it, how it could be done, but especially that area should not be developed.
It's being protected to some degree because the owner keeps people out. And therefore, the reefs that are growing in that area have always done very, very well and are now amongst that top 3 of best reefs left in the Caribbean. Ironically, harboring more corals now than, say, 30 years ago.
And it also acts essentially as a nursery for the rest of the island. So the currents are moving east to west, so they move from Oostpunt down the length of the island. And the idea is that when they're doing that, they're sweeping larvae down the whole shoreline, and these larvae can then drop out on reefs as they move down the island. It's actually been shown genetically in fish, in a certain fish species, that larvae produced at Oostpunt you can find at reefs down here. And what we found is that adult corals down at Oostpunt are producing many, many more larvae than at other sites downstream of them, so to speak. And so the idea is that these coral larvae are probably moving down the coast and landing on new reefs to help build them back up, or at least maintain the level of coral cover that they have right now.
It's important that the people of Curaçao understand how valuable and unique and rare that ecosystem is, while the decisions are made about how and when and where to develop.
But of course, education is crucial. If you live on such a small island, very close to the sea, it is very important that the youth from a young age learns about the ocean, the coral reef, and also they should be able to go out there with snorkel programs, and that the children learn about the value of the sea and the need of conservation from a young age.
I think education will be more of a fun part of what we do than a challenge. People have been really receptive and excited to learn more about what's under their waters and how it can be protected and preserved.
Rising ocean awareness in Curaçao is leading to environmental legislation around the region.
We will approve, that's a proposition that came from our county Curaçao, we will approve a law which focuses on the protection of seagrasses, mangroves and coral reefs within the whole Latin American continent and Caribbean. And that law will be approved in the 2nd week of May, specifically on the 15th of May on a Saturday within the Latin American Parliament. If I can put it in words, I would say it's the undiscovered truth. I think a lot of people don't know Curaçao beneath the sea, and it's a good thing to know it, how beautiful it is below the sea. Curaçao is one of the main, now it's becoming now one of the main diving attractions in the world, and we will keep it like that.
Well, as long as I live, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that we keep what we have. I know that there will be more damage before everything is fixed, but at least as a local in Curaçao, I do my best to preserve. Instead of fighting with the government, I choose to educate, because I know by educating that group will grow.
We can't go back in time. There are a lot more people on the planet. There are a lot more people on all of these Caribbean islands. So I don't think anyone really thinks that we can go back to whatever is considered a pristine coral reef. But what we can focus on is how to still make sure that there is a balance and that communities are getting the benefits of their ocean resources in a way that is sustainable. So this goes back to our simple goal of figuring out how to use the ocean without using it up.
Anybody else?
Luskay, it's good.
Hold there.
All right, all right.